we got coming up here? We got Jory Jensen. Here we go. There we go.
The GOAT is back. We got her again this week.
Oh, yeah. We got her all time.
Monday, best show ever.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Jory Jensen, our resident nutritionist, food expert, dietitian, joining us here. And today we're going to talk about, Jory, when we were texting this week about the endocrine system, I just want to say the word again, endocrinology. Right. So we're going to tackle something that doesn't always get the attention, Jory, that it deserves. And we're going to talk today about how the food you eat directly affects your hormones. And I'm not just talking about any hormones. We're talking about the ones that drive performance, recovery, and how your body changes over time. We've talked a little bit this week about insulin. Johnny's talks about that quite often, but let's talk today about testosterone, cortisol, insulin, and all those effects on our endocrine system in our body. Jory Jensen.
Yeah. So I think first we have to make this big fancy word endocrine system just seem a little more normal.
Yeah.
And so the endocrine system is really like this network of glands, and they create and release hormones directly into the bloodstream. If you think of, I'm trying to think of what John might say, but John, you'll jump in now. But for me, I'm going to think of, because if you went to a concert or to watch a symphony, whatever type of music you like, if you think of the conductor as the endocrine system, and each person playing an instrument is one of the hormones. And when you're fueling or not fueling your body in a way that's going to support what the conductor is trying to do for you, then things can speed up really fast and beats are missed and the body's just not functioning the way it should be. So that's like the endocrine system is, or the coach to the athlete in setting up the program. And so we want to just make it less scary, but it's still great science. And so there are key things that impact the endocrine system, and the endocrine system does include tons of hormones. But if we look at things like cortisol or the thyroid gland, if we're looking at testosterone, ovaries, all of those things, those are all part of the endocrine system or part of the band or part of the team. And strategies have a huge role in terms of how everything works.
I love this. I love your analogy of the band. Johnny, comment on this.
No, that's beautiful because it's so complex. When it comes down to it, I try to almost single out the parts that most people are, because most people, when you say endocrine system, they think, oh, that's my testosterone and my estrogen, which they're correct, but it's just a small piece of it.
Yes.
And for males, obviously, when we talk about endocrine system, they first go, oh, my testosterone. Yeah, correct. And if your testosterone is low, then you basically taken the whole system and thrown it off balance. And the more of these different hormones that are not where they're supposed to be, it's like a ship that starts sailing like this. And so I guess to put it simple, when most people think of endocrine system, they think about testosterone, but I'm just here where I guess we're here to remind you there's a lot more to it. Now, we have all these clinics that are all about testosterone and estrogen, and it's very important that you manage, especially as a man, that you learn to manage and make sure that your testosterone is in that range where it should be, because that one being off is going to have a ripple effect on a lot of other stuff. It's really good for us to have this conversation, because for those that don't understand how complex it is, that it's more than just your testosterone. That's what this conversation is about.
Because of course it relates to cortisol, insulin, and testosterone. So those three that obviously, the big ones we're going to talk about. But Jory, we don't often talk enough, I don't believe anyways, enough about the foods that we could eat that could affect our testosterone, our cortisol, our insulin levels. Let's take a few moments to really lean into foods that help enhance our endocrine system.
Yeah. So if we look globally, like
Yes.
something in sport, it's called REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport. So overall, globally, REDS, or just not getting the calories in when you need it, can shift hormone balance. So that's like very global, and that can impact something like testosterone, cortisol levels. And then it's the types of foods that we consume. So if we look back at the orchestra, if everyone is starting to create their own sort of beat and they lose and everything's out of whack, and they're going super fast, some are just like they've lost everything. That's in a way when we're stressed out and we haven't had stress management tools and we're exhausted, so we're fueling with tons of caffeine and tons of sugar, processed foods, like our blood sugar is skipping a beat and we're not in line. And that can have a huge impact on all of our hormones and how they work, because they are an orchestra. They work synergistically together. It's not only testosterone's working right now, only cortisol's working right now. They're hugely integrated. They're a team. So things that can help balance out hormones, even your hunger cues like ghrelin and leptin, your hunger and hormones, those are impacted by everything else as well. So if we don't have those high fiber foods, that will impact those hormones for hunger cues. If we're not getting enough sleep, that'll impact those. So there's so much going on, and foods, things like, I'm drawing a blank here, high protein foods, oysters, those sort of things, high zinc containing foods, those will have a huge place in terms of how testosterone levels will work as well.
Are there specific foods, Johnny? So Johnny, go ahead, Johnny, please.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that the one thing that people tend to not understand is a killer. We were designed to have like little bursts of cortisol, which is healthy. We're not designed to have this fucking beat drip all day long of cortisol, which is what we get when we live in anxiety. And for that guy that does everything right and goes to the clinic and everything's testing and he's got everything in terms of the supplementation of testosterone and whatever else he might need, but he can't control his negative thoughts and he's just getting punished with cortisol, it really unwinds the whole thing. So it's granted, there are foods that can help, which I love that we're talking about that. But I think what we also have to realize in today's society, if someone doesn't understand how to manage the negativity in their heads, because as we talked about, most of the shit that we stress out about never even happens. It doesn't come to reality. It lives in our minds only. And if you can't get a hold of that stuff and you're dealing with the straight up IV drip of cortisol across the day, every day, it's going to wreak havoc on everything else that you're doing when you're doing it. So it's just, there's so many different ways to look at this and so many different things that you've got to do to really manage this properly.
Interesting. So we balance this segment every week with mind, fuel, and protein break, because we talk about the importance of both mind and food. And what Johnny is saying right now is that cortisol will take absolute hold of you if you don't grab control of it mentally. What we're also talking about with Jory right now is the foods that we might want to consider choosing throughout our day to help us alleviate cortisol or help us be stronger and fit. And that becomes the challenge, isn't it, Johnny? Because mentally a guy's, okay, I got to go eat this. I don't feel good about myself. You're literally battling, aren't you?
And that's why I say the average man or most people will train the body. The elite train the body and the mind. Yeah. And training the mind is about keeping it in the right space so we're not dumping cortisol into the system on that constant basis. Of course, life happens, boom, we get some cortisol dropped in our lap. That's the way it's supposed to be. But when it's over, turn it off, move on, and manage that. There's just so many elements here in terms of there's eating right, getting your exercise, training your mind to recognize what you need to actually keep in focus and not. And all of this plays into the endocrine system. So I guess what I'm saying is when someone does all the stuff that they need to do, eating like George's talking about, making sure that they're testing their levels, but they forget about this, they're really leaving some massive progress on the table.
This is awesome because it just shows the importance of Jory joining the show, talking about the food. It just shows the importance of AJ dropping into the show and talking about, okay, Jory's told you about to eat, but if you can't figure it out up here, you're not going to have the success. Right? So I love how it all comes together. But Jory, as we wrap up the segment, what's one major takeaway? Let me ask you this, Jory, and trying to simplify without making it complex. Do we spend enough time talking about the endocrine system with our doctors or with ourselves, or do we just tend to put it aside? And should we, I don't like the word should, but would we invite our audience to consider thinking more about what John said and what you said so that they can have the success that they desire and frankly level up?
Yeah, I think in our healthcare system, you always have to fight for yourself and you have to know what you're fighting to begin with. So I think conversations need to happen. Otherwise, you don't know what you don't know and you don't know how to advocate for yourself. So I think that's definitely important. Regular checkups, chatting with people that actually know what they're talking about is really important. But then bringing it back down to things that are manageable is also really key. So instead of going into like obsessive behavior around what I can eat, what I can't eat, look at it as what can you choose today in terms of fueling your body the best that you can, right? Okay. Not everyone can afford to eat organic all the time. Sometimes it's on sale. Great, go for it. So what can you do the best of your ability? Can you limit plastics, which disrupts hormones. So storing your food in glass containers, not plastics, that can secrete hormone disruptors. Are you getting the proper sleep? One of the big things
yes, massive.
Tracking your food for calories and macros. Why don't you track your intake? You can use the same food trackers, but use ones that look at what's your vitamin D intake, what's your omega-3 intake, what's your fiber intake, what's your fluid intake. Take a look at those things and manage those. And I think that's going to create a lot of change in terms of your mental well-being around food. It'll change things around how your body is able to process and metabolize food so it can get into the cells and be used properly. So yes, it's complex and complicated. Do not get me wrong, because I'm not a specialist in this area. However, I will say that we can simplify it enough that the average Joe, the average Jory, can absolutely start taking steps and advocate for just being a little bit better.
Yeah, the power of simplicity. And I love something you said there, Jory, is I know Johnny uses the tablet and the scale and he writes things down with his rock and everything, but there's such power in creating awareness, isn't there? Whether you're using an app, a piece of paper, or a rock, but just the idea of creating awareness, Jory, and writing down what you're eating. You don't have to do it forever, nation. Take a week, 2 weeks, just start writing things down and create awareness and go, oh, okay, I get it. Jory, before you rock and roll here, we got a couple quick comments coming in here. We got Mike Quillen coming in. Hormones are the difference between what should happen and what does happen in the body. I like that. That's great. We got Yuel coming in as well with stress hormones are designed to trigger your body to break things down. And Carrie saying, I take lithium orotate to control negative thoughts. I admit, don't know much about lithium. And hey, listen, nation, we're not here to offer advice. We're just stuff from folks in the comments here. And then we have Yuel talking about managing hormones and managing stress. So clearly we've tipped a nerve here, Jory, with this topic. It affects all of us, right? Cortisol and stress and testosterone and everything. And we certainly want to come back and have this conversation again. Jory, thanks for hanging out with us today.
For sure. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you, Jory.
Thank you, Jory.
Thank you.
Jory Jensen, the Protein Break, our resident specialist, talking always good stuff, talking leveling up, tips from successful entrepreneur. But today we're talking about leveling up and how to manage your endocrine system. But hey, right now we have somebody coming up on the show, and I'm looking for that button.